Hey everyone, I hope that you are doing well. In this video, we are going to cover IXL Assignment T10, Volume of Cylinders, and that shortcut code is 9F3. Now, for those of you that watch most of my IXL videos, you know typically I do them directly on IXL so that way you can really see that correlation and know that it matches up exactly with what you'll be doing. For this one, though, there is such a wide variety of questions, and I really wanted to make sure that I was able to get one from each sample. So I have taken screenshots, all right? So this still is directly from your IXL assignment. I'm just doing it with PowerPoint instead, so that way I can know for sure that you guys will see a sampling of everything, okay? All right, even though that there are different types, everything is focused around the volume of a cylinder. So for this entire assignment, you will be using the formula for the volume of a cylinder, which is pi times r squared, so r stands for radius, times the height of the cylinder. All right, let's get going. A cylinder has a height of 4 yards and a radius of 4 yards. All right, what is the volume? Use pi as approximately 3 1/400ths, or most people could just say 3.14, and round your answer to the nearest hundredth. All right, our first step is we want to identify what information we have been given. And I see here that we have been given a height of 4 yards. So our height is 4. Our radius also happens to be 4 yards. And it is instructing us to go ahead and use 3 1/400ths, or 3 1400ths. I don't know why I said that wrong, my bad, as our approximation for pi. Sometimes problems, not in this IXL assignment, but sometimes problems will have you leave your answer with pi in it. So don't simplify completely. Other times they'll have you use the pi button and then you just round your final answer. But in this case, it is telling you to go ahead and use that approximation of 3 1400ths as your value for pi. All right, now that our first step was done, which was pretty quick and painless, we didn't have to really hunt for any information, we need to substitute. All right, and if we look here, I have color-coded things. So we are going to be substituting into our formula the value of 3 1400ths for pi, and that is going to be multiplied by r squared, where in this case, our radius, our r, is 4. And then that is multiplied by our height, which also happens to be 4. Once you substitute everything in, the next step is to follow order of operations to simplify. Well, order of operations says parentheses come first. Now remember that it means parentheses as a grouping symbol. So which set of parentheses here is being used as a grouping symbol and not only as multiplication? Hopefully you said 4 squared, because I know that's a grouping symbol because there's an operation. There's something for me to do within the parentheses. So it means both the grouping symbol and multiplication. It's doing double duty. If you didn't pick up on that, well, and you said, no, there's no grouping symbols, the very next step is exponents, which is what we see here, and you still would be lucky and get it right. All right, this right here is one of the parts that we need to make sure remember is how to do exponents. Is this, when you have 4 squared, when you have an exponent, is that 4 times 2, or is it 4 times itself 2 times? It's the latter. That exponent tells you how many times you're multiplying the base. So we are multiplying the base of 4 times itself 2 times, which means this, ooh, wrong color, oopsies. This is really 4 times 4. All right. Let's bring everything else down. We have 3 and 1400ths times 4 times 4, which is 16. And then that is multiplied by 4. All right, once you get to this step, it is all multiplication. And one of our properties in math is that when you get to something that is straight up multiplication, it doesn't matter the order, which means you can just multiply this straight into your calculator. So 3 and 1400ths times 16 times 4. And let me show you how I did that since, if I can get the glare not to be too bad. There we go, that's decent, I guess. You can just multiply that entire thing into your calculator. And when we do, we discover that the volume is 296 hundredths. Now let's double check a few things before you submit your answer into IXL. First, see if you have to round. Well, our directions told us to round to the nearest hundredth. How many decimal places is that? That's 2, because when you have your decimals, the first place is the 10th, and then the second is the 100th. So we only have 2 decimal places, which means I'm good. I don't have to round. And then on IXL, it goes ahead and labels it for us, so we don't even have to worry about labeling our answer. IXL does it for us, which means we would be ready to put this in as our answer. All right, let's try another one out. Sometimes on IXL, instead of it giving you the problems in words, it's going to give you a picture. All right. This time we want to still know the volume of a cylinder, same formula because it's the same shape. And once again, we are going to be using 3 and 1400ths as our approximation for pi. But in this case, since I have a picture, they have the diagram labeled, but I got to figure out which one of those 2 numbers is my radius and which one's my height. Let's start with height because that's a little bit easier. So when we think about height, that's how tall something is or how tall someone is. So the height of this would be how tall our cylinder is. Right here, if I know they're both in green, so that makes it a little bit tricky, but right there, that is our height, which means we have a height of 11 millimeters. Now for our radius. When we're dealing with the radius, that is always part of a circle. So we are looking for the circle portion of our cylinder. And right here is the top of our cylinder, or if it labeled the bottom, that would work too, either the top or the bottom of our cylinder is the circle part. That is where you're going to find your radius. Now is 10, because 10 is what's labeled, is 10 our radius? I hope that you said no. Hopefully in your head you're thinking that the 10 is the diameter. Your diameter, and I'll do that in purple since we're not using that color, your diameter is what goes from edge to edge of a circle. The radius goes from the center to the edge. Let's trace over that in red. So our radius goes from, ooh, that's a bad circle, that's okay, goes from our center to the edge, which means our radius is half of the diameter. Let's make this red. So if my diameter is 10, what would be half of 10? So 10 divided by 2. 5. The radius for this problem is 5. There will be times that you'll have problems like this, that you have to make sure that you don't go too fast and just get in the habit of saying, oh, they're always giving me radius. No, sometimes they'll give you diameter and you have to quickly find the radius. But your radius is half the diameter. So what we just did there is we took our diameter, which was 10, and divided it by 2. And that gives us a radius of 5. All right, now we have all the information that we need so we can substitute it on into our problem, or on into our formula. All right, volume is equal to pi, which once again, we're said that we're using 3 and 1400ths, multiplied by our radius squared, 5 squared, then multiplied by our height of 11. All right, once you do this, you'll see that it's almost identical to that last problem because the formula is the same. So when you're given the radius and the height and you're being asked to find the volume, when that's your question, the problems end up being pretty similar, which is kind of nice. You get lots of practice and you can quickly get the hang of it. All right, we need to start with our exponents. So 5 squared, what is 5 squared? Hopefully you said 25 because remember 5 squared is 5 times 5. 3 and 1400ths multiplied by 25 multiplied by 11. Once you get to this point, it is straight multiplication. You are allowed to use a calculator because you will be given a calculator on these problems on the FSA. You'll type in 3.14 times 25 times 11. We'll see how bad the glare is. It's decent. We'll multiply all that out and we get the answer. Our volume is 863 and 5/10. Once again, double check your rounding. It wants us to round to the nearest hundredth. This one automatically is rounded to the nearest tenth, which means it's okay. It just would be an issue if we had to the thousandth, so 3 decimals or more, then we would have to round it. And once again, it's already labeled for us. So that's it, just type in that answer and you're set. All right, at this point, I hope you're starting to say, all right, Mrs. Elstack, I get this. That's not too shabby, not too bad. When you're working on IXL and you get up into that 50 or 60 range, you may get some questions that look like this. It won't all be like this, but you'll start to get a few of these sprinkled in. So let's read it and see what I'm talking about, see how this is a wee bit different. A cylinder has a radius of 7, okay? Its volume is 2,461 and 76 cubic centimeters. Whew, that's a big number. What is the height? All right, what's different about this one? Yeah, I'm not trying to find the volume. I know the volume. Instead, my unknown value is my height. And yes, we do have a large number, but remember, you have a calculator, so it makes it a little bit easier. All right, even though my work is a little different, my initial step is still the same. I need to identify the information I'm given. And the information I'm given is that it has a radius of 7, a volume of 2,461 and 76 cubic centimeters. That's a mouthful. And once again, we are using the approximate 3 and 1400ths for pi. All right, our second step remains the same of substituting in the information that we know. This time, my V is not going to stay a variable because I know the volume. So my volume is going to be substituted in for V. We have our pi. We still have our radius. And then this time our height is what we're looking for. That is our unknown, which means it stays a variable. All right. Well, once you do this, there's still a lot of similarities. I still need to start with order of operations because I need to solve this equation for h. But whenever you solve equations, you always start with simplifying. And I need to simplify that right side of the equation. All right, let's recopy this bad boy down. 3.14 times 7 squared. Exponents come first. What is 7 squared? That would be 7 times 7, which is 49. All right, I still need to keep simplifying. I still need to get that h by itself, which means I'm going to multiply. I'm only multiplying at this point our pi, so 3 and 1400ths, and our 49. That's the only piece of information we're multiplying because our volume, that big number, the 2000 number, is on the other side of the equation. So he is not dealt with yet. We just keep copying him down so that way our work can stay nice and organized. When I multiply these together, we get 153 and 86 hundredths. All right, now this next step is the first one that actually is a little bit different because we want to solve for h. We have a one-step equation, which you guys have been doing since 6th grade. What do we need to do to get h by itself? Divide, because whenever you are working with equations and you're moving something to the other side of the equation, you do inverse operations. So inverse, the opposite. Right now, we have multiplication. So the inverse of multiplication is division. Let's divide both sides by 153 and 86 hundredths. And once again, yes, I know these numbers are large, but you have a calculator, so just be careful. Make sure you type it in correctly, but you're A-okay. So when we put this into our calculator, the numerator, so that top number, is typed in first. So 2,461 and 76 hundredths divided by 153 and 86 thousandths. Sorry if I said the wrong thing earlier. No, wait, that one was hundredth. The numbers are so big, I'm mixing up my words. I apologize. But we type it in as so. And we actually get a nice simple answer. That divides out beautifully. And we discover that the height is 16. All right, and that's it. So it does take a little bit more work because it's kind of having that equation built in. The numbers are a bit larger, but there's a lot of similarities. All right, guys, if you're looking off to the side, you should notice that we have one more problem left. All right, stick with me here. If this one was a little bit confusing, we're going to do one more, so hopefully that'll help answer some of your questions. All right, this time we have a cylinder that has a height of 12. But once again, it's given me its volume. The volume is 3,768 cubic meters. So I am trying to find the radius. So very similar to that last one, only instead of finding the height, we're finding the radius. But our first step never changes, and that first step is to identify the information we're given. We're given a height of 12, a volume of 3,768, and we are given to use 3 and 1400ths as pi. What we're trying to find is the radius. That is our unknown. That is going to stay a variable. All right, our second step continues to remain the same, which is to substitute. Our volume is 3,768. That is equal to pi, which we're using 3 and 1400ths, times our radius squared, but that stays a variable because I don't know my radius, times the height, which is 12. All right, now this one does look a little bit more different. There are two different ways that you could do this. One way is if you remember the property of multiplication, when all you have is multiplication, we have multiplication here, multiplication here. You're allowed to multiply in any order. So your first step could be to multiply 3 and 1400ths times 12. Let's go ahead and just stick with that method for right now. So 3 14/14 times 12 is equal to, so we still have our 368 here. That is equal to 37 68/100, because we multiplied these two, times r squared. All right, now we need to get our r by itself. What did we just do in that last problem? Divide. Let's divide both sides. Oops, wrong color. Divide both sides by 37 68/100. And once again, when we put that in our calculator, the numerator goes first, so 3,768. Then hit the divide by symbol. Now our denominator, so 37 68/100. We get a nice even number of 100. Right, this point right here may be a little bit different, because we know what r squared is, but we want to know the radius. What is the inverse of exponents of that square? Because up here, the inverse of multiplication was division. So what would be the inverse of this exponent? What would be this inverse of a square? And don't say circle, because we're not talking shapes. Well, I mean, I guess we technically are, because we're talking cylinders. But the opposite of a square is not a circle. The opposite of a square is a square root. We will take the square root of both sides. Now, if you have your perfect squares memorized, then you will just know this answer. But if you don't, for me, I have to turn my phone sideways. And then this symbol that I drew, this red symbol, it looks very much like a division bar, but it's not. If I type that in, let's see if I can get it screened. So for me, this button right here is the square root button. And then I pressed that first, entered 100, and it gives me my answer, which is 10. So the radius of this cylinder is 10. All right, guys, I hope that this helps clear some things up for you. If you happen to be watching this video either today, Monday the 22nd, or tomorrow, Tuesday the 23rd, and any of this is a little confusing, please note that Wednesday's lesson, if you look at your newsletter, is the volume of a cone, which is very similar. So you will continue to get more examples, and you'll get kind of that back and forth practice with me. All right, but I hope this video helped clear things up from Friday, so that way you guys can get this assignment done, because it is due tomorrow, Tuesday the 23rd. So make sure you work on it so you don't get a missing 0 and it bring down your grade just for you to have to bring it back up. Let's keep it nice and steady. All right, if you guys have any questions, send me an email. I'm here to help. Bye.